Yeah, thank you very much for all of the audience that stayed. We will try to make this discussion as interactive as possible. So if you have a question that you want to ask, it will be amazing. So be part of it. What we will try to achieve in this panel is to give the perspective of students, me and Tal, and researchers, which is Varda and Ofer that will present themselves in a minute, about how they look or about the path that they took during their academic career. If they chose to focus on basic science or applied science, it will, even if those topics were present in the academia at that time. So first of all, I would like you to present yourself, what is your research topic, and then maybe about your career, how you became a professor, and what was your interest in the research that you were doing, and also emphasize if applied science and basic science was present during the time that you were in the academia. You're still in the academia, but you get where I'm going with this. So, Varda, would you like to start?
Yes, actually, I did my first degree study here in this university after I ran away from the medical school in Hebrew University because I thought it's working.
Yes.
Because I thought it's not my style. And after that, I did my PhD in Weizmann Institute in photosynthesis together with Professor Shavit, that was member here in this university. And I switched from photosynthesis to a muscle contraction during my postdoc in Toronto. And when I came back to here, I have been offered positions in Hebrew University Institute, but I decided to come to here because I would say I feel that I had the feeling that I can contribute much more to new and young, relatively young universities than to establish one like Weizmann Institute. And I'm not sorry that I did it. Here I switched to different topics, including regulation of biological processes, biochemistry, and what actually I'd like students to know, that you should not be afraid. And for example, I started with photosynthesis, I went to muscle contraction, and currently, over the last few years, I work on many topics, starting from cancer to Alzheimer to Parkinson to NASH, which is a non-alcoholic fatty acid, autoimmune diseases, and all of them, because I discovered a new mechanism for how cells can die, and I try to apply or to attack this mechanism by developing different approaches to activate this cell death mechanism in cancer cells, while to prevent it in Alzheimer, where the neurons, or Parkinson, where the neurons die. During my stay here in the university, actually I was the chair of the department. That time I recruited Ofer. Okay, and after that, during my stay, it was the idea to establish a new institute in this university, biotechnology focused, and to serve as the gap, as to bridge the gap between basic and applied science. Until 2006, and actually I was not thinking at all about applied direction. I thought, I will understand how nerve activate muscle, I will understand how calcium is important, I will understand how we can understand how cell is dying, and things like that. But when Avishai Bravma, at that time, the president of the university, came to me together with Philip Middleman and Raymond Dweck, both very famous scientists in the world, and they said, that's what we have from President that time, Ariel Sharon. We have a commitment that we can get $30 million if we can get from a donor, etc. It doesn't matter the point of the money. But the idea that the government that time, sorry, I don't want to talk about politics, but it's not these days, was listening to the academy, understanding that there is a way that we can try to change and to make. It's not. It's also for the good of the people. to develop drugs and to develop biomarkers to identify early stage of diseases. So and that's why it was great. We obtained that money together about more than close to $100 million. We established that building that you see in the corner, the glass building, and we recruited scientists that, just for example, there is this ERC grant, European grant, which can be up to $5 million, and the average success in Europe is 5%. And the people I recruited, it was almost 50%. So it's mean when you select, so it's the word selection is not good, but when you find a person that has this view that can combine basic and applied research, this is also attractive to grant proposals to the grant agents, because otherwise why we have so high percentage of success? Because these people, they are committed to combine basic and applied research. The institute gives them money for technicians, for doing the research, for students, and in fact we wrote so many patents and so many things, and we established even 1 or 2 companies. For example, I have now 5 companies that I established, 2 in the United States and 3 in Israel. And this is, again, I was never thinking like that. Just this institute changed my view that it's not making money. It is actually developing good things for the people. And I think we have to remember that without basic science, there is no applied science. They are very tightly connected. But you have to help how to connect. So you need people from the industry to give some advice. You need more in the university also, more people that can go with you over the study and try to see what is the direction or the way that you can transform your studies or your basic research into the applied research. So in general, once I was very negative when I was after PhD and postdoc, but later on I changed my mind, and I think that it's good for everyone to try to take basic science and to translate these findings into applied science. Sorry that it was too long.
Thank you, Varda. I will try to be a little bit shorter. I did all my degrees here at BGU, and then after completing my PhD, I investigated different questions related to population biology, species interaction, competition, and I knew that the model organism that I'm using, gerbils, small rodents living in the sand dunes in the desert, cannot be used for applied science. But the different topics that we explored related to competition sometimes can be applied to some other fields in economics. So it wasn't my task to make the link. I was interested in investigating important topics related to species interaction. This was my main focus. Okay, so it wasn't applied research, but I knew that somewhere out there, some people can use the concepts that we develop and apply them in other fields as well, not necessarily applied science. And then I did my postdoc at Yale University, and I continued to investigate species interactions in a more complex system, spiders, grasshoppers, plants, a more holistic view of the community, instead of looking only at 2 different species that compete with each other. Now I have a predator, and then the predator would feed on the herbivores, and the herbivore is feeding on plants, and we have different species of plants, and they may compete with each other. And when you remove the predator, you change the interaction strengths between the plants, so you can create high ecological complexity, high biological complexity in a small scale. And for me, it was fascinating. So I did both empirical study and also a theoretical study, and I never thought that I will do applied science. And in my field, population biology, applied science means that you do conservation biology. And the reason that I was not interested in doing conservation biology, I thought, okay, if I will investigate an endangered species, I won't be able to do an experiment. So I felt as if it's going to be a lot of hand waving. So it's not well-grounded science. It's a lot of speculation. So I was trying to avoid conservation biology because I felt it would risk my integrity as a scientist. But then, over time, I realized that it's about time for us scientists to do some dirty work. Instead of criticizing people in the Nature and Park Authority for taking decisions that are not scientifically driven, because they have their rangers, and the ranger would say, oh, I have a feeling that the gazelle would do much better if we would do this and that. But their decisions are based on instincts. Sometimes instincts are good, gut feeling, but not necessarily on solid science. And at that point, I felt that it is also my duty to participate and help in this effort to protect nature. So it's not my main focus, but from time to time, I'm willing to do also conservation biology, not for money, because each time that I do it, I feel good with myself. I feel as if I did something good for nature, trying to conserve an endangered species, which can play a critical role in the ecosystem. And this is the reason that I was willing, and I was even happy to do applied science within the field of conservation biology. And as Varda said, she recruited me, she offered me a position in the life sciences department, and I was very happy. And I'm in the department since 2004, and I'm very satisfied.
Thank you, guys. Kind of seems unbalanced to give me to talk after these two, for sure. So you don't know me, my name is Tal. I'm from the Health Science Department, aka the dark side of the university, behind the bridge. I'm currently a PhD student here. I did all my degrees here, and I did all of them under the guidance of Professor Thomas Cooks. But we are working in our department, and in my lab in particular, we're working on extracellular vesicles, which is cell-to-cell communication, and I'm doing it in the context of pediatric cancer. And aside from that, we're also working alongside a company called Alpha Tau Medical, which are a company that are using alpha radiation radiotherapy to try to cure cancer using alpha radiation inside the tumor, so that way we are focusing it directly into the tumor. And I'm also doing that on pediatric cancer alongside glioblastoma. So I'm doing both applied science, I guess, and basic science on that field. But I never thought about those two as things that are separate, because I thought, oh, I'm doing this to understand exactly what I'm doing, and then I'm using that to try to do something that will benefit someone else in the future. I never see those things as separately up until, I guess, a year ago, when I joined Teva for doing some sort of a project with them. And that's when I understand there is a huge difference between the two. But again, my perspective that those two are separate never really came, because I still see those two as intertwining. They are always causing each other either way. So I guess that's pretty much my spiel, I guess. So, thank you.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Did it?
Do yourself?
Yeah. I'm done in Somekh. I did my bachelor degree in Bar-Ilan University in biotechnology, and now I'm doing my master degree in Itzik Mizrahi Lab in NIBM, and that's it. I don't have anything to elaborate more. But I had a question to Tal before selecting the lab.
Yeah.
That now you're doing your PhD. You were aware to the differences between applied science and basic science, and does it was it matter to you if your research project is going to be applied or basic?
So when I joined my lab, it was in the second year of my first bachelor degree. Tomer just came to the lab and sent an email that he's looking for people to help him to organize the lab. We only opened it. And at that point, he had no students, no nothing. I was the first student. I didn't think at any point that, oh, I'm going to join a lab because I want to do something that. I joined particularly just for the pure enjoyment and fascination. And later on, when years came along and Tomer didn't manage to get rid of me, we said, okay, let's try to make it into something that maybe has the potential to develop into something better, which this is what we're doing now with the alpha radiation. It just happened.
Now, Ofer, you mentioned that specifically your interest was about gerbilium, if I understood correctly. Yes. Gerbils in English?
Gerbils.
Gerbils. So, most of the time people look at ecologists as non-applicable at all, but you still stick to this topic. It was interest by you when you were bachelor students, master students, PhD students, if you could do something applicable with the research that you are doing now, or you mainly was, people mention it a lot, it was just, you fell in love with it, you just enjoyed the science and the basic questions.
Okay, thank you. I didn't invite this question, but it's great. The reason that I wanted to study biology, I wanted to be a veterinarian. So I ended, my wife is a veterinarian, so this was the, okay, I had to make a decision, since I'm not a veterinarian, to find a spouse who is a veterinarian. So this was the main reason. And before starting my BSc, I was confident that I know what ecology is. I was sure that ecology is like the guide that would tell you story, that usually half truth, half fake, about different plants and animals, just to make you interested. Okay, the חברה להגנת הטבע, the protection of nature reserve. No, not Nature and Park Authority, חברה להגנת הטבע, the Society for the Protection of Nature. And somehow, accidentally, I got a job as a research assistant in the lab of a population biologist in the life sciences department. Before starting my degree. And I think I was puzzled for several reasons. First, he told me, here, I don't need you only to go to the field and catch the gerbils and so on. I would like you to use your brain, to think. I expect you to read papers, to understand what we are doing, why we are doing it. And I realized that it's not as if that they like gerbils and this is why they put some trap to catch them. So there is a theory, and I read theoretical papers, and it was tough for me. And I realized that they have hypotheses. And then they collect data, and they need to use advanced statistical methods to explore the data and to arrive at conclusions. And at this point, I realized that what I had in mind about ecology was completely wrong. And I felt that this is what I would like to do for the rest of my life, to search for interesting model systems, to investigate them, and not only to investigate them because it is interesting, always to have theoretical background, hypotheses, to design experiments, and so on. And already when I began my BSc, I knew that I don't want to be a veterinarian. And so I continued to do my master's and PhD in Zvika Zabramsky lab, and I interacted with many good people within the department and in other departments in Israel and also in Sde Boker, and for me it was an excellent experience.
I have a very interesting question for you, Varda. Before founded.
Is it a question?
Yeah. Can I? Yeah. Go ahead.
I have a question to Ofer. If you are doing applied ecology, then you change the system you work on, one that affect the basic research. I mean, in biochemistry, we can create, we can purify the proteins time after time after time, and it will be the same. Want to understand how do you ignore it? I don't know if it's ignoring, but how can you still do basic science after you change your system? Won't it be affected?
Okay, so the basic science is just to understand how species interact. So for example, some species, they feed on each other within the same population, cannibalism. And then you have, they also compete with each other indirectly over resources. And they compete with each other by pushing each other. This is what we call interference competition. And then you add another species and they feed on each other. This is intricate predation. And they also have a shared prey, okay? So I'm interested in understanding ecological complexity. This is my main interest. So now, when I do applied science, there is a specific problem to be tackled. We would like to save an endangered plant species. How to save the species? So first, you need to assess the status of the population to understand what is the probability that the population will go extinct. So you need to construct a model in order to make such predictions. It's not as if that someone will tell me that there is a 30% risk that the population will go extinct within 50 years or 100 years. So I need to construct a model based on existing knowledge, or maybe to gather some additional knowledge about the natural history of the focal organism, and to make predictions for its fate. And then I need, based on the model, and if I know the natural history properly, I can see that some life stages, if you affect them, you are more likely to increase the population growth rate drastically. So if I would like to make some change and to avoid extinction of the species, maybe this is where I should interfere. Increase the survival of the adults instead of increasing the survival of the eggs. Why? Because if I increase the survival of the adults by 5%, I go up in the population growth rate by 50%, okay, and the population will not go extinct unless they are in a very small place and there is a catastrophe, and so on. So it's not as if that it is always the same system. In addition, what you asked is a key question in conservation biology. Some people, even in the Nature and Park Authority, they say do not interfere with the system. Simply do not enter there. Why? Because we don't want to interfere with the endangered species. Okay, let us block the area. And I personally think that this is not a good strategy, because we have a huge impact on nature. We already had a huge impact on nature. So now saying, okay, I will let nature do what it should do, and some species will go extinct, I think it's not fair. It's not the right strategy. I personally believe in doing active management. You need to interfere in order to protect the system. If you will not interfere, you will find yourself in a situation where the system will go a shift, and it would end up at a new equilibrium point, which most likely will be very unsuitable for us. Because if you examine the history of Earth, each time that there was a mass extinction, most species were extinct, and then the system stabilized, conditions changed, okay? And I personally believe that we have the ability to tackle many difficulties, but I think it's better not to be in such a situation. To keep the buffer, because planet Earth is like a buffer. You eat it, and it would go back to the stable state, which is convenient for us, at least now. Once it will change, I don't know what would happen.
So we have more 7 minutes we have, so we'll have some more questions. So we'll try to make it concise, and then we can also take more questions from the audience. So Varda, you mentioned that before founded NIBN, you were mainly focused on basic science. So now I'm interested if your research proposal for grants were changed over the years. So before funding NIBN, you were mainly focused on basic science and saying, you know, this is more for the impact of humanity, or this is applied science. So how it's changed during the years?
First, most of the available grants like ISF, BSF, etc., they don't accept any applied science. If we, in the committees, I have been in 16 committees, if we found somebody that submitted
Pure applied
applied science, we always reject and send it back. There are other sources that you can look for applied, like the government has several grants for industry or for that you can apply for, but they require much more doing the applied science in much more advanced stage. That was why NIBN actually tried to make this, to bridge this gap. First of all, to give different language. People didn't know that they have to protect their results before publishing them. Even in form of a poster in a conference, it can really block your ability to protect a patent or something like that. And also some of the research you cannot do because you don't, the money that you have from grants is not to check for toxicity of your molecule or something. So it was really, that's why NIBN, I think, is one example of what should be in other places in Israel, because there is no way that we can do only basic science. Like, look, the cyber and all these kind of directions proved that you can do better for the society and for the world if you have developed something that can save or protect your computer, your programs, and etc. So I think that here also, but like what I did in the institute, I recruited two very good people from the industry. Their company was closed because of toxicity of their compound, and they used to come. They made for us books. They explained to us what it's required. So it's not simple to jump from basic to applied. If you don't have the resources, if you don't have the advice, you don't have the, and I'm sorry, nobody hear me here saying that, but BGU is not doing the job. I mean, it's not BGU, BGN, the applied or the tech transfer company is not doing the right job.
Do you think we should push researchers to do more applied science? Or if there is a researcher that says, I don't want to patent this, just let it be like this? Do you think we should choose one direction to force them or not to force them?
Actually, as I said, you cannot do any applied science without basic science. So basic science, even if you have an idea and you have already, just example, I developed a molecule that is really miracle. Now 30 companies sell it. But still, just this last week, I submitted a paper explaining better how this molecule works. So it's always need the combination and the crosstalk between the two fields. For scientists, I would suggest young scientists, please focus only on basic. This until you get full professor, and then you can do what you want.
Amazing. I have a question.
I fully agree with Varda. I didn't bother to do conservation biology before I was full professor.
I will take one question for
Yeah,
for
that
that.
also one for time. Yeah.
Tal, but I can come to you and say, students can come to you and say, listen, I don't want to stay in academia. I want to do a PhD and then go to the industry. So why should I focus on basic science and not in applied science? I should go to a lab that do applied science. What do you think about it?
That's a good question. It's a question that actually I think about it quite a lot because I now need to understand what I want to do when I grow up. It's a good question on the sense that if a person is initially says, I've done my master's, done my PhD, I don't see myself pretty much staying in the academia, should I now focus myself more on applied science than basic science? I tend to agree with Varda on the idea that a student should remain on basic science because basic science gives you much more bigger toolbox to go forward and then apply them on the applied science when you move to the industry. Because once you do applied science, you are much more narrowed down your options and you're much more focused on a single goal, and you can open your mind and bridge your horizon further when you're doing applied science. That's the way I see it. However, that's also coming to understand of what kind of applied science you want to do. If you're doing applied science that is in the beginning very generalized, and then you can pick and choose where you can apply it, maybe more, but those are more rare than the basic that we know today.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to ask whether you intend to found a company. And I want to tell you, the fifth person who was, no, not the fifth, the sixth person who was actually supposed to be there is Michael Schaffermann, who just finished his PhD in Vital's laboratory. But unfortunately, he has to stay in Gaza, which I'm very concerned about. Anyhow, and he said he wants now to found a company. And I ask, because he wants to evade the confinement of academia and all the restrictions he has as a postdoc and so on and so on. And I talked to Amir Sagi, who was the first speaker this morning, and who does both. And he said that is a complete illusion. In a company, especially when you are new, you have so many restrictions and you have so many regulations, and it is a complete illusion to escape the boundaries of academia if you want only that. You know, that I want to give his voice at least here, and I'm really sorry he's not here.
Yeah.
In fact, about 75 to 80% of the projects that were patent covered and transferred to the industry, were not developed further. And this is because they are too early. I mean, we give the companies our findings because we protect the patent too early. And then this is why basic science is important. They do mistakes. They don't, they get something not exactly what the scientist showed in his study, and then they throw away the project. But if they were with the basic science orientation, they will try more 2 months and find a way how to save that good project.
So I also would like to say something. I always had excellent graduate students. Some of them continued to the academy, some of them went to the biotech, and I have at least 2. One already got a position after being in the R&D in one of the companies in Israel, BioBee. He decided I would like to go back, but it's not pure academy, he's in Vulcani, but he's doing science, applied science and basic science. So it is possible to go back from the industry back to the academia, and now I have an additional 4 graduate students who is applying for positions in universities and also in Vulcani. I would like to believe that he would get one position.
Willing to found the company?
Yeah, I don't know if Ota would ask us because she knows that I tried to open the company.
No, I don't know.
So last year I was one of the fortunate people to get elected to Teva Scholarship, which 30 students around the country getting selected, and they're starting their own startup idea. And there's a small competition, and then they can do it forward. And I was able to reach to the finals and get the third position, and we managed to get a collaboration with Soroka and Shiba. We had a really good idea. Shiba themselves were very pushing hard for us to do OpenNet as a company. They offered a lot of money, but unfortunately, as Varda said, when you don't have a patent, you don't have much of a defense, and when you don't have much of a defense, you are much of a high risk. And when you're much of a high risk and you don't see that you will be able to create enough avenue to cover that up, if you very quickly find yourself not opening the company and then asking yourself, why the hell did I spend so much money to find a way to do a patent, and you find yourself not opening a company. So if in the future we open one, you know, the sky's the limit. Let's see if we will reach this position, maybe one day. Right now, I do currently think that I will go for post, so maybe once I will go back, who knows? God knows.
So, our time finished. So, first of all, thank you very much for the panel. Thank you, Varda, Ofer, Tal. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for the people that left until now. You're amazing.
And thank you, Daniel. That's
Thank you, Daniel.
very good. And yeah, thank you.
Master student, look what, you know, in this stage as a master student, I'm expecting him a lot. PhD and,
I'm expecting him to become philosopher of science.
In parallel to being
In parallel, yes, of course, in parallel.
Keynote
You cannot live from that. But, okay. Anyhow, so we are almost here. But we have some wine and leftovers, and I kindly ask you to join us at least for some minutes.